afternoon we have the great honors because PUC has received Dr. Choi. He's the Vice President from the Global Hadong University, South Korea. He has a lot of experience, and this afternoon he would like to share his experience with all you guys that know more about the business. And so I hope that you can ask him a lot of questions. As I mentioned so far that in the past, long time ago, good students, leave home seeking good guru for long distance to find good guru. Now we are lucky, as Dr. Cole mentioned, that good guru come here, fly over here to teach you. So I need you to pay attention, take note as much as you can, and ask the question at the end of the presentation. So then I would like to invite Dr. Choice to the floor and to present.
Good afternoon. How are you? When I was young, middle school student, when I first learned English, the first chapter starts with "Good morning, how are you?" And the answer is always "Fine, thank you." And you? Of pronunciation, Che, Choi, Chi, or whatever. So many words, and privilege to come to Hanasastra University. Especially today is a great day for myself as well as my university, Hadong Global University, because Hadong Global University and Hanasastra University of Cambodia have signed an agreement, signed a memorandum of understanding, so-called MOU, to cooperate in entrepreneurship education through UNESCO Unitwin program. You know what UNESCO is? Do you know what UNESCO is? Anyone? UNESCO starts with UN, and then you have E, C, S, and O, right? What does the E stand for? Raise your hand. We have a prize for those who have the correct answer. Anyone? E. What does E stand for? What does E stand for? Does anyone know? Yes. Huh? Enterprise? Not really. You will have your second chance. What does E stand for? Global Advancement at Hadong Global University. Before I joined the faculty last year, I was as it's shown here, Monetary Policy Committee member of the central bank in Korea called the Bank of Korea. The Bank of Korea Monetary Policy Committee determines interest rate, short-term interest rate, every month. Every second Thursday of each month, we determine interest rate to be used for 1 month. And 1 month later, we come back and discuss and determine interest rate for the next month, and so on and so forth. So I was on the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank for 4 years. And before that, I was with Seoul National University as a professor of finance. And before that, what did I do? I was a professor in Central. There's no place to go except global. So I pulled out a list of universities around the globe to see if any of the universities have the name global in there. And behold, there was university which has the word global in the university name. That's my university, Hadong Global University. That's why I joined Hadong Global University. It's a joke. From this front page of the slides, you can find a few key words that my university president is very fond of. The so-called his favorite words. They are reflected on the front page. Can you guess what they are? Anyone? From the front page, you see one or two words that are stretched. Huh? Raise your hand so that I can see. Yes, over there.
The word is global, sir.
Global. Correct. Given the prize. Thank you. If you answer my question, you get the prize. And if you ask me good questions, you will get a prize too. So we'll do this seminar interactive. Today I'm going to talk about global economic outlook and risks. To some of you, maybe it's disappointing because I don't talk about capacity building for SMEs in Cambodia or entrepreneurship in Cambodia. We'll talk about that later when time comes or when I come back next time. But today I'll talk about global economic outlook and risks. And this presentation is very timely because of what happened in the US yesterday. Do you know what happened in the US yesterday? Raise your hand, raise your hand. Let me give you a hint. In the US, there is a central bank. The central bank in the US is called Federal Reserve Board. Okay? Federal Reserve Board, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board is Mr. Ben Bernanke, whose picture you are going to see later on. He made some announcement yesterday, and do you know what that is? Anyone? Has any idea of what happened? Well, I know that central banking is not the most favorite subjects in colleges. Okay, yesterday, Chairman Bernanke announced that the United States is going to reduce money supply. Reduce money supply. So far, U.S. Central Bank has been pouring money into the system. You know, Cambodian students want to know about what I'm going to do is go through the slides and talk about it. You don't have to copy it. You don't have to write it. If anyone is interested in the subject, you can have this copy. I will make this file available to you. You can access it and you can get it. And before I go any further, the presentation file is based upon several sources. It is collected from several sources. Number one, OECD material. Second, from the Deutsche Bank research papers. And number three, Bank of Korea research papers. So I have to let you know where I get all the information. The OECD, Organization for Development of the Countries. And number two, Deutsche Bank. And number three, Bank of Korea, where I used to work. This is from the OECD presentation material. In year 2008, the world experienced a very severe crisis called, yes, global financial crisis. Prize for her. Global financial crisis. And because of this global financial crisis, the world experienced severe downturn in the economy, or severe recession, severe decline in economic activities around the world. And since 2009, a lot of countries around the world, major leading nations as well as emerging nations, as well as developing countries, they've been working hard to bring their economy back on track. We call that bring the economy back on trend. A lot of effort have been made, and some of the growth has been successful. So growth prospects remain strongest, especially in the emerging economies such as China, Indonesia, India, and Chile, and Mexico, Turkey, Korea, Israel, and so on. Okay. Many of emerging countries are showing good economic recovery. And the ones that are not coming back is Europe, Spain, Italy, Portugal, France. These countries are lagging behind. But anyway, global economy is coming back, and year 2014 and 2015, global economy will become stronger. Yeah, that's good news. The speed of recovery is so slow. Some people call it painfully slow. You can see this is the peak time of economic activity before the crisis, and the bottom one is the economic recovery since year 2008, and it's lagging far behind previous recession recoveries from recession. So the world economy is coming back out of recession, but speed of coming out or speed of recovery is so slow that that's painful. The reason why it is painful is because of your jobs. Economic recovery means jobs are being created. College graduates, they get jobs and employment opportunities. And the economy is slowly recovering. It will be so much hard for young people like you to find jobs and to find employment opportunities. So that's why governments are trying very hard to bring the economy back on track. But this is very slow, mainly because 2008 was becoming weak or weakening. It become worse. The first one is global trade. Trade is slowing. I was told by a good friend of mine who knows about Cambodian businesses. In 2008 and 2009, U.S. was at the center of global financial crisis. U.S. The crisis started from U.S., but many of Cambodian textile industry or textile companies went bankrupt in year 2009. Do you know why? Yes?
I think because all the textile product is imported to the United States.
Right. Cambodian export to the United States or U.S. import from Cambodia of textile products. The U.S. reduced its consumption of textile, and that's why Cambodian businesses cannot export any textile products, and that's why these companies went bankrupt. Okay, here's a prize. Yes, the trade is something that makes the world economy go. But trade is slowing. That's number one problem. And the second problem is many of these countries are still experiencing very high unemployment, lack of jobs, especially in the Euro region, Europe, especially in Europe, and especially among youth and young people like yourselves. Jobs are not readily available for college graduates, and this is a problem. And investment is something that produces jobs and growth, but investment is very weak or getting weakening. And credit, the bank lending is lagging. It's not acting up. Emerging economies are becoming slower and more vulnerable to external shocks, which I will be talking about later. Okay, one example is global trade. This is the trade as percentage of GDP, and it is growing since 1990. This global trade over global GDP is rising at a very steady rate. But 2008, it collapsed, and it has not come back. It has been stagnant since then. This is the total volume of global trade, and global trade in 2005 through 2008, it was briskly rising, but 2008 and 2009, it fell dramatically, and then it has recovered somewhat, but not in the old trend. They are lagging behind. Global trade is lagging, especially because of European weakness, and especially because of Japan, especially because of China. These countries that import from other countries, they are not importing. So global trade is slowing. That's one big problem. The second problem is, as I said, stubbornly high unemployment, especially in Europe and especially among youth. This unemployment rate, the yellow line is Euro area. Euro area unemployment rate is 12%. US unemployment rate is still 7%. And US wants to bring it down to 6%. And it might take more than 1 year. It takes a longer time than countries are used to. Japan's rate is steady at 4%, but not improving. OECD-wide, these advanced countries' unemployment is very, very high. And among youth in Europe, unemployment rate for college graduates is 60%. So 10 people graduate from college and 6 people do not find jobs. Only 4 find jobs. I hope that the situation is better in Cambodia. And I hope that's the case with Korea too. Jobs are so critical, and creating jobs is a very important task for national leaders, government leaders. But that's painfully difficult. Now let me talk about each country separately. For example, United States. US, the origin of the global financial crisis, is doing very well these days. It's very solid. It's coming back up very strongly. US steady on recovery track. Employment is improving. Unemployment is getting down. It might take a little longer than they are used to, but employment is getting better. Each month, 200,000 new jobs are being created in the US. That's a very good record. In the US, In October and in November, consistently they created more than 200,000 jobs. If you continue that trend, in 1 year, they can create 2 million new jobs. And that's fantastic for the US. So US unemployment picture is getting brighter. US housing sales are going up and house price is also rising. You know, global financial crisis, the main cause of it is due to housing difficulties. House price collapsed and housing sales collapsed. But now it's getting back up. So housing as well as unemployment picture is getting brighter, and US is having fine, clear, nice day in economy. And growth outlook for the US is more than 3% per year, and that's very fine record for US. That's a terrible record for Cambodia. For Cambodia, it has to be more than 7%, but in the US, more than 3% is a fine record, very fine growth rate. And a lot of organizations, they are projecting that US growth will continue for another year and 2 years and 3 years. So the medium-term, long-term forecast of US economy is brighter, a lot brighter. And that's why Brett Bernanke, the chairman of the US Federal Reserve, went out to public, and Bernanke's central bank decided that they will reduce the supply of money slightly because they have confidence that the economy is getting better. So that's for the US. Now let's look at Europe. This is the order which I used to use as a monetary policy maker. I look at the US, Europe, Japan, China, and Korea, and financial markets and exchange rate markets, and then make a decision. And this is the order. The second place I look at is Europe. Europe is lagging far behind the United States, but there is positive news in Europe too. The Europe region is recovering slowly, but risks are still large. PMI is the business people's perception of the economy, and PMI being higher than 50, 50 is the midpoint. If it is higher than 50, that's good news. The business prospect is good. And lately, during the past few months, PMI has been above 50-point range. So Europe is finally beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Europe has been in the dark tunnel. Unemployment is getting better. And the top part is, although it's written in Korean, it's growth, and bottom part is inflation. Growth is small but positive. It used to be negative. You see, year 2013 it is negative, but next 2 years it will become positive. So Europe is finally growing again. Europe has been declining, getting smaller and smaller, but Europe is finally coming back and growing. And inflation is not acting up. Usually when growth occurs, inflation also occurs, but inflation is not following. So that's good news for Europe. But there are many risks still remain. I'll talk about that soon. Third place I look at is Japan. Because Japan is the third largest economic bloc at the moment. And Japan continues to recover, but first of all, it's PMI, Procurement Managers Index, or the Sentiment Index, is improving since Abenomics. Prime Minister Abe, when he became Prime Minister last year, as soon as he was inaugurated as Prime Minister, he said, Japan has 3 arrows. 3 arrows. It follows the story of Japan. a dying father is asking the sons, 3 sons, bring an arrow. And the first son brings an arrow to him, and the father breaks that into half. Second son's arrow, and again, break it. The third son's arrow, also broken by the father. And father said, okay, now bring arrows again, 3 arrows, and give 3 arrows, and give the 3 arrows together to his first son. Break them. Break them. And he was trying, but he can't break them, because 3 arrows together, it's hard to break. And second son cannot break them. And third son cannot break them. And the father said, you should be united in order to survive. You have to be one. 3 arrows to be one. So 3 arrows is an interesting story of Japan. And Prime Minister Abe is so good in using this story. Japan has got only 3 arrows. The first arrow is easy monetary policy. Just pour money to the economy. Print more money. Print more ends. The central bank prints more money and give them to the public, companies and the consumers. Easy monetary policy is one arrow. The second policy is government spends, crazily spending money, government expenditure, increased government expenditure. Because no one is spending in Japan, government is spending instead to promote the economic activity. So first, monetary policy, easy monetary policy. Second, the expansionary fiscal policy. And third is enhancing competitiveness of industries, so-called economic restructuring. Okay? These 3 arrows, when they are implemented, then they will have effect. And the first thing they did is Bank of Japan began to pour money into the system, very easy monetary policy. And the government of Japan was spending like crazy. I'm sorry of this expression, but they spent lots of money. Okay. And because of that, somehow, business sentiment is getting better, and many of the economic indicators are becoming better. Because of the easy monetary policy, Japanese yen is losing value, therefore exchange rate rises. In other words, $1 gets more Japanese yen than before. So Japanese yen becomes weaker, and weaker currency promotes export. So Japan's export is rising. Japan's export is rising. And because of rising export, Japan's businesses are selling more. Gets into deflation. The economy shrinks. Because people know the price will be lower next year, so they don't spend. If people don't spend, then business cannot sell. And business cannot sell, then business cannot hire people. And they will have to lay off people. And people lose jobs, they cannot spend. And they will make even consumption lower, and lower consumption make businesses to lower production, and lower production causes lower employment, and this causes vicious cycle. And Japan has been suffering from this vicious cycle for 20 years. More than 20 years, Japan has been suffering from this problem. So 3 arrows are used to bring Japanese economy out of this deflation spiral, deflation trap. And finally, inflation is coming back in Japan. So at the moment, Abenomics seems to be working for Japan. And I hope that this Abenomics works for Japan, because that's good for the global economy. Okay. And Japan's growth prospect is not bad. So all in all, US is getting much better, Europe is getting slightly better, slow, however, and Japan is getting better. So everyone is getting better. How about China? China continues to grow, but the pace is a little slower. But this is intentional. Prime Minister Li Keqiang of China has said that China doesn't have to grow at 8% per year. China has been growing more than 8% per year. China cannot grow that fast. And Prime Minister Li said, China, with 7.2% growth rate, China can comfortably grow. China's economy does not need high growth rate. 7.2% is adequate. Now, China is showing about 7.5% growth rate. So China is, the growth rate is slower, but still it's okay. The PMIs, consumer confidence, they're all good, and investment outlook is also very, very positive. So China is coming back. So what's the problem? US is doing very well. Europe is doing reasonably well. Japan is not doing bad. China is doing okay. So everyone is doing okay. And emerging economies and developing economies are doing all okay. So the globe is doing better than before. But there are risks. Risks still remaining. The first risk is US tapering. Tapering means reducing money supply. Do you know how US Central Bank, US Fed, supplies money? The newspapers and media, they say that the Chairman Ben Bernanke is called helicopter Ben. He rides on a helicopter and he throws money away to people. People get the money and spend. That's why his nickname is Helicopter Ben. Actually, that's not what is happening. When the central bank wants to increase money supply, to print more money to the economic system, what they do is they buy government securities, government bonds. They buy government bonds. When central bank buys bonds, instead they provide money, and that money becomes spendable. Okay? That's how they create money, they print money. And Federal Reserve, US Central Bank, has been purchasing 850 billion US dollars. That's a huge amount of money, huge amount of money. 85 billion US dollars every month. Every month they buy 85 billion. Now, from January of next year, they are going to reduce the purchase level to 75 billion. And only 10 billion. You know, how big is $1 billion? $1 billion, let me tell you how big that $1 billion is. $1 billion is, every day you spend $1,000. Every day you spend $1,000, and for 2,000 years you live, spending $1,000. For 2,000 years, hope you're alive for 2,000 years, because you still have money left. That's how large $1 billion is. So that's a huge amount of money. So $10 billion is not a small amount, but we are so used to $1 trillion. So 10 billion, that's a little bit. Yeah, that's a little bit. If you look at from the US, the Federal Reserve, but that's a lot of money, and that is being reduced from January of 2014. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem is when the Fed becomes, the Fed is tapering the money supply, or reducing money supply, the US dollars are used all around the globe. In Cambodia, you're actually using in daily life, right? In Korea, we have US dollars, then we exchange it to Korean won and spend Korean won. US dollars are used for trading, importing and exporting. Okay? US dollars are so prevalent in the whole world. Okay? So dollars are flowing all the time around the globe. And the amount of dollars being used in the economy, global economy, is reduced. What happens? The money will flow out of Cambodian system. Money will flow out of Korean system. Money will flow out of Japan. Money will flow out of China. And money will flow back to the US. And when money is becoming less available, then people begin to feel pressure. They will not spend as much as they used to. They will not produce as much as they used to. They will not invest as much as they used to. So because of US Fed tapering, emerging economies are being hard hit because the money is flowing out. Here's the problem. For Europe, for Japan, it's okay. Money slows down. Oh, back. US Fed tapering makes EMEs be exposed to financial turbulence. May 13 is the time when Mr. Bernanke indicated that US might reduce the government purchase of assets, securities. And because of that, bond prices were falling. When bond price falls, interest rate rises. Stock price falls, interest rate also rises. And bond prices were tumbling because of Bernanke's hint at reduction of money supply. And October, Bernanke said, we might not do tapering that soon, but 2 months later, he did. He announced yesterday that we'll taper, we'll reduce asset purchases. And that will cause tremendous impact on regional economies. I heard the news conference of Raghuram Rajan. He is governor of Reserve Bank of India, India's central bank. He used to be the chief economist of the IMF, and he said this tapering, I don't know how it will play out, but this will have certain impact on many emerging economies and developing economies, and we'll see the impact in the next few days. Emerging economies with large current account deficits, I had heard. You know, current account deficits is, simply speaking, export minus import. Export is good thing, right? Import is bad thing? Well, not necessarily, but people in many of the emerging and developing countries, they always think that export is a good thing and import is a bad thing. But that's not exactly true. But anyway, export minus import is so-called current account. If import is larger than export, we call that current account deficit. And current account surplus means country is exporting more than importing. How about Cambodia? Cambodia is current account deficit country or surplus country? Well, everybody say deficit country. Yes, all of you are right. Cambodia is deficit country. So current account deficit country is hard hit by this thing because when there is current account deficit, this deficit will have to be filled up by capital surplus, capital account surplus, that's borrowing, or FDI, or ODA, money, the assistance money, foreign aid. And current account deficit is large and capital is less available, then the exchange rate will have to rise. And when exchange rates are rising so fast, then there will be inflation and there will be all kinds of difficulties. This is the picture that I drew a couple months ago. On the horizontal axis, it's current account over GDP. Here's 0%, and over here, that's current account surplus, and over here, current account deficit. And this vertical axis is foreign currency reserves, dollars or euros, the convertible currencies that central banks hold, reserves over GDP. And this country is, in Korean, Malaysia. Malaysia has a large current account surplus plus large amount of reserve. Thailand is right here. These two countries were very hard hit during the Asian financial crisis some 15 years ago. So they know how bad it is, how terrible it is to have financial crisis. So they do have large amount of foreign reserves, and they try to keep current account surplus. Let me read some of the cases on the other extreme. Turkey, South Africa, India, red is Brazil, brown is Indonesia. These countries are having current account deficit with low foreign reserve, so they are very vulnerable. Where is Korea? Korea is right in the middle. It takes time, a little bit of surplus. I know President Bang is usually agreeing with her that human development is such an essential ingredient for economic development. But the difficulty with human development is, for example, education. It takes a long time to show the fruits. But even with that, we have to try. We have to try. And Cambodia is doing very well in terms of human development. It's taking time. It will take time. But have hope. Have hope. Beware of excessive inflation. So fiscal prudence is critical. Fiscal prudence, by that I mean government spending. Control government spending in order not to cause inflation. Let me move fairly quick. Here, Cambodia has a very fine score of attracting FDIs, foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment is a very healthy money. And healthy money comes from, lately, very probably from Korea, from Japan, and from China. And Korea is number one here. So I'm so glad that Cambodia and Korea are cooperating with each other. I guess I've been using this thing too long. So here's conclusion. 2 slides to go. The first slide, the world, it's the task or lessons for the world. The global world needs to keep trade open. In other words, don't block trade. Don't try to increase export at the expense of others. Keep trade open, push for large regional agreements. The countries should join this free trade agreements or freer trade, multilateral free trade. Restore confidence and address risks and reduce policy uncertainty. I speak with business people all the time, and business people, when I say to them, increase investment, and you know what their response is? Yeah, we would like to increase investment. That's bad news. I want policy. Third, repair financial system. Financial system in Europe is terribly damaged, and we need to repair them. Make progress in structural reforms, especially Europe. The structural reform is needed. Japan as well. Finally, for developing countries, enhance external orientation. Increase both import and export. Increase export more than import, however, to keep current account deficit surplus, but enhance external orientation. Korea is a good example of using external orientation to bring the economy from poverty. In 1970, the Korean government decided to have external orientation. They say, let's export. And in order to export, we can import. You import oil and then process it and export. That way you can make your country very strong in trade. And strong in trade is naturally very strong in economy. Increase infrastructure investments, soft infrastructure as well as education, hard infrastructure as roads. And I heard that the roads and bridges, some of the hard infrastructure in Cambodia need improvement. And that's for sure. If you have good infrastructure investment, that facilitates economic development. Encourage entrepreneurship training and education. That's what we're talking about. You need entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is to create something out of nothing. My colleagues over there, they can attest to this Korean case as an entrepreneurship success. It didn't have enough resources. Korea didn't have enough natural resources. Korea doesn't have a nice climate as in Cambodia. The Korea agriculturally poor. Natural resources are very scarce, but somehow Korea made progress in economic development. That's through entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is something that creates from nothing. So the Hadong Global University and PUC, we are joining hands to start entrepreneurship education at PUC. And the graduates from this PUC entrepreneurship school will become entrepreneurs to bring Cambodian economy out of poverty, and it will bring the country into prosperity. Finally, develop capital markets. Since my background is capital markets and finance, I would like to emphasize that you need to have a better financial system to bring more capital into the productive sector of the economy. Okay, that's all I've got to say. The next page is thank you. Let me take a few questions. You can make a good lecture better by asking questions. Anyone?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
Right.
Yeah, 16 gigabytes, 4 gigabytes in USB. Yes.
Is there any activity, economic activity between North Korea and South Korea?
Say it again.
The economic activity between North Korea and South Korea?
Yes, there is. The size of it I do not know. I don't have the information on that. But there is some economic activity, some trade between North and South. Not across the demilitarized zone between North and South through ports like Hong Kong, China. There is some trade going on. But I don't know the exact amount. And I don't think we have official recognition of the amount. Give him a prize. How many do we have? We have many, so you can ask many questions. What was that for? Yes. Yes, that's not related to this subject, but I am glad that you asked because I was going to mention it anyway. One day before I left Korea, I was told from a person who is in charge of student exchanges. He told me that if any PUC students who are interested in studying at Hadong University for a semester or for a year as an exchange student, with President's recommendation letter, I'll be very happy to provide full scholarship. Korean government is providing scholarship to the students recommended by the President of the PUC or universities of developed countries. So go ahead and do that. Any other questions? Let me take two more questions. Yes?
Spend a lot of money, and then there will be a budget physical impact. And do you think that impact is quite?
That's an excellent question. You have to give a prize. That's a very good question. The question is the Abenomics, three arrows, will they be long-term sustainable? Can Japan continue the policy of Abenomics for a long period of time? I frankly do not know. My personal opinion is I'm skeptical. I'm a little skeptical. We cannot do it forever because what Japan is doing is very ordinary. This is not ordinary. This is outside of the ordinary policy. And when extraordinary or unordinary policy continues, then there will be distortions in the economy, and that distortion will come back and haunt you later on. For example, if Japan uses this policy of government spending supported by the central bank, essentially that's what it is. And it's called monetizing the government budget. Central bank produces money and give it to the government, and government spends it. That causes inflation in the end. Japan inflation problem might be as bad as the inflation problem that they have been suffering. But immediate consequence of uncontrolled government spending is going to make Japanese long-term interest rates to rise. And when long-term interest rates rise, then Japanese government will have to spend more than half of its GDP of the government budget as debt services. Right now, it's 50% of the spending budget is used to service the debt. It goes to 60% or 70%. So your income is 100, and you are using 70 to pay back your debt. You have only 30, and that's not sustainable. No matter how tight you have your belt on, you have to live. But with 30% of the budget for government, that's impossible. So I don't think this can be tried for a long time period. But I don't know how long that they can sustain. Excellent question. Thank you. Two more. Oh, three more. Okay. Yes.
Can you give the strategy or recommendation for to increase the grow economic in give some strategy?
Wow. I wish I knew more about the Cambodian economy, but from what I studied a few days ago, before I came over, I looked at some reports on Cambodian economy. One is, at the moment, Cambodia has three major sectors that support economic growth. One is textile, second is tourism, and third is agricultural. And I think it's a good mix. However, you need to improve your infrastructure so that your ag products can be exported more easily. Number two, your tourism industry is not growing as fast as it could because of infrastructure. Transportation, roads, and these things, they are not as good as many competing countries. So improve infrastructure. Third is ag products. Cambodia has a tremendous supply of ag product, agricultural production, and make more what you call it, make products a little more advanced. In other words, try to have more value added on the ag products. That's indeed a very good job. However, I don't have an immediate answer. If I had an immediate answer, I would have given you already. Creating jobs is a difficult thing to do. But to make your economy more advanced, you can create jobs. The Korean newly inaugurated Korean president is Park Geun-hye. She has been proposing creative economy, where the economy, the businesses and consumers, they find newer technology, innovative technologies to produce goods and services. To make the economy more advanced and one level up, that can create better jobs. It's not just the number of jobs, it's the quality of jobs as well. The quality needs to be improved. And you have to have a thorough restructuring of the economy to have better environment for job creation. Good question. However, my answer is not as good as yours. Sorry about that. Yes? And you, and that will be the last.
Just one more question. Frankly speaking, I don't really understand all of these things, but I just want to know that where the central market is and who controls that. The central market, not the central bank.
The central bank.
And if the U.S. still just trying to buy something from the central bank or something, and no one just take action to do about this for now.
That's a difficult question to answer.
That's okay, I just asked. But I really don't understand about it.
Okay. Let me make two quick remarks.
Yes.
I may not be able to give you the answer that you would be satisfied with. Number one answer is, I don't know, I don't fully understand myself, so don't feel bad. There are a lot of things that I do not know, and perhaps there are more things that I do not know than I know. That's why I keep learning. At my age, I'm still learning. I'm still reading books. I'm still reading journal articles to be updated with advanced knowledge. I'm still reading. I'm still reading just 1 or 2 papers a day on that Saturday. Within 1 week, I'm still reading a lot of books, not just about monetary policy, but about a lot of other things, so that I can be up to date. I can be updated with knowledge. And knowledge production is so fast, so you have to keep updating yourself in order to stay with the trend. So don't feel bad. You don't understand a lot of things. There are a lot of things that I don't understand myself, but keep trying. One day you will know that, oh, I understand this. This is what Troy was talking about. One day you will realize. Okay. Number 2, what happens if the economic agents, I call it, the components of economic system, like consumers and businesses and the financial institutions, they do not take the central bank action seriously. They ignore it. Well, they better not ignore what central bank says. You never fight central bank. Central bank is very, very powerful. I was a central bank myself, and I cannot imagine where the financial institutions or investors they go against the central bank. In U.S. they say, don't fight the Fed. Yes?
Yes. Thank you for your presentation. And my question is that, can you tell us about the reason why the global financial crisis in 2008 occurred, and will it happen again or not?
President Bank, invite me one more time, and I'll come and I'll give a lecture on global financial crisis. He's asking me to tell him that why global financial crisis occurred. And I need 1 semester to answer. We still do not know exactly why. There are many reasons that have been suggested. It is because of the greed of bankers and greed of those businesses. It's because of complexity of financial derivatives. It's because of shadow banking. It is because of global imbalances. There are so many reasons that have been suggested. I frankly do not know the answer yet. I can tell you all of these things, but that takes time. So for now, global financial crisis can occur anytime in the next few years. But the economic policymaker should be ready, or should try everything to reduce the probability of having economic crisis. The economic crisis is very painful. The economic crisis is very painful, not because it is causing not only because it is causing difficulties to a lot of people. It is especially painful because financial crisis causes more pain to those people who are poor, who are helpless. Rich people, they can survive, but poor people, they cannot survive. Right? That's why the government has to do everything to avoid financial crisis. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Very good and very enlightened address about financial crisis. This is very important. But some concept like what one of the question was raised that why we do not is completely independent. They make policy, monetary policy. The government can work only on fiscal policy, so on spending. I think we are so happy to hear from the specialists in economics, So later on, if some of you interest in entrepreneurship, and we have a major in entrepreneurship, and our program, entrepreneurship program, will be associated with seminar and course conducted by two more professors in the back, Kim and I know the staff, the one who gave you the Portuguese class. And we have also one freshly graduate from Hadong. Here, I believe we have one last student working in Hadong right now as scholarship from Hadong to our university in for master degree in law as well. So see you when our program pick up. So you are invited to join the seminar on entrepreneurship. You know what entrepreneurship means? Mean you, when you graduate, you do your own CEO. You become your own CEO. And by one, you become CEO of one or two, or you can create a new job for other people to come to ask you. You don't have to go around and begging for job. And that is all entrepreneurship about. Create job, make people work, and then make the economy prosper. So you will have peace. Thank you, Dr. Cho. I'm sorry our projection was not clear, and I have not been to this room for maybe a year and a half, and some need to be, with the microphone and everything need to be updated. Upstairs, they still have the seminar on women. Those downstairs on Freedom. I'm sorry, Freedom. Fourth floor. Some of you want to be great women leader. You can join for the rest of the seminar there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.